spring and cable counterbalance system for 7 and 8 foot high doors. In this video, you're going to see how to install the counterbalance system for a 7 and 8 foot high lifestyle screen. We'll start back at the hardware box contents, and in this case specifically the counterbalance bag. First, cut the counterbalance bag open and then empty the contents onto the table. Gather the two 3-inch long spring anchor angles and the four 5/16 by 1 5/8 inch lag bolts. Set these aside and organize the rest of the counterbalance hardware as you see here. The rest of the counterbalance bag contents is seen here after the wall anchors and lag bolts are removed. You have 4 3-inch sheaves, 2 3-hole cable clips, 2 3-inch sheave straps, 2 S-hooks, 4 3/8 inch by 1 1/2 inch hex bolts, 4 3/8 inch hex nuts, 2 1/4 inch serrated flange hex nuts, 2 1/4 inch by 5/8 long track bolts, 2 5/16 inch by 1 inch hex bolts, and 2 5/16 inch hex nuts. In addition to these hardware items, you have the cable and the springs. Take a sheave strap and place it through the spring with the angle of the tail of the spring as you see here. The head of the 3/8 bolt must be placed through in this orientation and then secured with the 3/8 nut. This completes the left-hand side spring assembly. And now to the right-hand spring assembly. Note the orientation of the angle of the spring loop and how the bolt is being assembled through the 3-inch sheave strap. It is important to note this because this is a left-hand and a right-hand spring assembly configuration. Assembling the spring to the door in the wrong manner allows the end of the bolt to rub against the track. The head of the bolt will be facing the track. This is why the springs are left-hand and right-hand assemblies. Flip the springs end for end and insert the S-hook into the opposite end of the spring. Note the orientation of the S-hook as it is inserted into the angled loop of the spring. The tail of the S always goes to the open side of the spring. Now remember the spring anchor angles and lag screws? You are going to install those on each side of the door now. Please note that before you affix the spring anchor angle, it must be even or flush with the top of the horizontal angle. Using the two 5/16 by 1 5/8 lag bolts, affix the spring anchor angle to the wall. Be sure that the angle is plumb. And repeat for the left-hand side of the door. Place the S-hook of the spring into the middle hole of the 3 holes that are in the spring anchor angle. When you are finished, the right-hand spring should look like this when hanging. And likewise, the left-hand side should be the opposite. Now you'll take a 3-hole cable clip, place it on the sheave, and place a 3/8 by 1 1/2 inch hex bolt through the sheave and take a 3/8 serrated flange hex nut and prepare to assemble it to the back hang. Now when placing the sheave on the back hang, you'll always want to place it in the center or the next hole above the center of the distance between the 2 horizontal tracks. Thread the 3/8 serrated flange nut onto the bolt. Then finish tightening the nut. Now you'll note that he adjusts the 3-hole clip because this needs to be horizontal before fully tightening the nut and bolt. And repeat these steps for the left-hand side. Now it's time to unwind the cable. Be very careful when unwinding the cable. If you kink the cable when you're unwinding it, the door will not operate in an optimal manner. The next step is to lift the door into the horizontal position and clamp it so that you can proceed with the stringing of the counterbalance cable. Now it is important that you clamp the door in the proper position. The center line of the cable pin must be tangent with the 3-inch sheave as you see here. As you can see, the cable pin has a recess in one side. This is the side that you feed the cable through. Pull the cable through the pin over the top of the 3-inch sheave that's mounted to the track, pulling the cable all the way through the pin until the stop is fully seated in the recess. Now while keeping tension on the cable, you're going to string the cable to the back of the door, and you're going to see how he creates a loop at the back of the door and loops it over the sheave that mounted to the back hang. Notice all the while he's keeping tension on the cable. Now he works towards the front of the door. He feeds the cable through the top of the sheave that's mounted to the spring. He pulls this completely tight, making sure that all of the cable stays on all 3 of the sheaves. Now he works his way to the back of the door, and he's going to place the tail of the cable into the front hole from the inside of the 3-hole clip. He pulls all of this cable through. He then feeds the tail of the cable into the second hole of the 3-hole clip from the outside to the inside. Then he pulls the tail of the cable out as you see here. Be careful not to scratch the extrusions when you are pulling the cable. Refer to the manual for the proper spring stretch for the size door that you're installing. Mark the horizontal garage door track at the proper dimension. Pull the cable that is attached to the spring sheave to stretch the spring. Stretch it to the correct dimension that you've marked on the track. Feed the cable through the 3-hole clip. Be sure not to kink the cable in case you have to adjust it. The cable was just a little bit overstretched, so he's going to let a little cable out of the 3-hole clip. Now that he's satisfied with the length of the stretch of the spring, he's going to lock the cable in place by looping the tail through as you see here. Now back to the front of the spring. You can see that the sheave is not resting vertically. To remedy this, you're going to have to flip the spring 180 degrees on the S-hook at the front mount. In preparation for stringing the safety cable, you are going to loosen 2 lag screws that secure the spring anchor angle to the wall. Next, feed the free end of the cable through the sheave end of the spring. Once it emerges from the other end of the spring, pull the cable tight. And feed the free end through the middle hole of the spring anchor angle as you see here. Pull the cable tight. Before pulling completely tight, be sure that the cable sits on top of the sheave bolt and nut. Snug the cable and retighten the lag screws. Trim the cable, leaving 3 or 4 inches extra. And repeat this for the right-hand side of the track as well. And this completes the spring and counterbalance system for the 7-foot and 8-foot high lifestyle screens.